Has our reality changed without us knowing? This is Tony. Hope you're all doing well. I just did a video over my other channel talking about this topic. It's absolutely amazing. When you think about it, how much has things changed since the 1980s? And how about before that? If you think about a time frame, let's say back 500 years ago, they didn't have so many quick changes to society in such a short period of time. Now, of course, some of this could be contributed to social media. But what is social media is not what you think it is. Check this out. Let me play this real quick and we'll get into this.
When I was growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, everything felt different than it does today. Perhaps it was just the warm naivety of childhood. But I think it was actually something else.
No, indeed, it was something else. And like I said, we're going to get into some new things in this video I didn't get into over my other channel. We'll be talking about those men, of course, in black, a little bit more in this video. But actually, we're going to get into a ton of stuff and how I think this all played out, how our reality is always continuously changing. And could this actually be related to even CERN? We'll get into that as well. Check this out. Let's play this clip here.
The internet emerged and unleashed access to information upon the world. The middle-class dream was alive and well.
We have indeed seen the internet change things so quickly. Now, a lot of people are not aware of how the internet started. It actually started at CERN via Tim Berners-Lee in 1989. And of course, if you look into the funding, you'll find that the funding very much relates to a lot of the other things I'm going to show you in this video. It usually comes from two families, and they seemingly change, of course, society through this. Now, let me show you something rather curious. There was a TV show called The Twilight Zone that first aired back in 1959. This was the first episode called Where Is Everybody? Now, what's really interesting is the intro to the TV show The Twilight Zone. The words that it says, a lot of people have heard it many times, I'm sure, if you watched the show. But we should actually take a closer look at what it actually says. Now, I don't want to play the clip because I don't know if it's copyrighted. Well, let's just read this here. Rod Serling was a multi-talented man and a good writer. His television series, The Twilight Zone, ran for 5 seasons. Now, here is what it says in the text. You're traveling through another dimension, a dimension not only of sight and sound, but mind. A journey into a wonderland whose boundaries are that of the imagination. Notice that going from one dimension to another is via the mind and the imagination, as it says in the text here. That's a signpost up ahead. Your next stop, the Twilight Zone. Now, the Twilight Zone is actually a zone between dimensions. All right? You unlock this door with the key of the imagination. Again, the mind. Beyond it is another dimension, a dimension of sound, dimension of sight, a dimension of mind. You're moving into a land of both shadow and substance, of things and ideas. You've just crossed over into the Twilight Zone. There's a 5th dimension, beyond that which is known to man. It is a dimension as vast as space and timeless as infinity. It is a middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition. Now, of course, as I mentioned before on video, they have tried to, or they've actually successfully caused religion and science to be separated, history and science to be separated, and it's become more and more well known over time. A lot of people just simply don't see it because, again, I believe changing of realities is via the mind. And why is that the case? I had someone in my comment section of my other video saying, well, you're not really literally changing dimensions. I'm like, no, wait a second here. What is your reality? Your reality is conversing with other humans, interacting with other humans, and seeing what humans do around you, what they create. We were given the power of creation. We're made in God's, of course, image. So we actually have the power to create a reality. You see what I mean? And if you've been led the wrong way, you'll make a wrong reality, right? And so what my point is that you technically you could say, yeah, you're not in another dimension. You could go out in the forest right now, and the forest will probably look the same as it did back in the 1800s. But you'll be none the wiser of things being changed. But no one lives in the forest hardly. Most people live in society, and they do most of their activity in society. You see what I mean? Now, social media is a tool. It is a technology. CERN, of course, is a technology as well. These are also part of the picture. So I do think it is more than simply changing minds. There also is technology that can go along with this. A lot of people have talked about the Mandela, of course, effect. And we've seen things and examples of this. And actually, some are saying it's getting more dramatic and more obvious, where they look at things in the past and like, that was not that way in the past, right? And actually, I had my own little example of Keanu Reeves. I used to believe Keanu Reeves was gay. I know this sounds a little strange, but I remember him being with a guy a long time ago. And I remember finding articles saying this even. I think I could even go find one right now that says it. I've shown it on video. But everyone, if you ask anyone today, is no, he never was. He was married to a woman. And it was so strange to me when I learned that he was married to a woman. I'm like, what? And so this was something from a long time ago. This was like over 20 years ago. It was right at the beginning of the internet. And there's a couple very old articles that talk about this. Okay. At any rate, that's just one example. There's like millions of these. Okay. I'm sure you've seen many of them. A lot of them are with cartoons and stuff like that. I'm sure you've seen, or logos, or how a certain logo has changed over time. So there is something to be said about that as well. Now, what's interesting about all this is that we had CERN created back in 2008. Okay, this is when they first tested it. Now, a few years after this was 2012. On the Mayan calendar, it was the day when all the realities collided, where they're all joined in unison to where you could easily change realities. And some people say that is when things started really changing, was around 2012. There's also other ancient texts other than the Mayan calendar that talk about 2012 as being the last day. I remember seeing some American Indian tribe. I covered it. There's an American Indian tribe that had a very accurate record as well that they were covering, and they showed a point where everything crosses, these timelines cross, and things can change. And I think it was around 2012. I can't remember the date, but it was something similar to the Mayan one. And it was a long time ago. I can't even remember what tribe, American Indian tribe it was, but I remember seeing the stone where they drew it in, and it was very accurate. Like they had some stuff predicted on it, and they happened. It was very strange. And I covered it maybe 2 years ago on YouTube. It's been a while. I have cobwebs in my head. I can't remember exactly how it went, but Hopi, was it the Hopi tribe? I think it was the Hopi. Let me look that up. Hopi tribe. I don't even know how to spell it. Hopi tribe? Hopi. Okay. Prediction. Last days. Here we are. Hopi prophecies. Yeah, there was something about, it was something very similar to the Mayan calendar. And they talked about there would be a timeline where everything comes to a point and we have a choice to which timeline we go on. And this also relates to this concept of the red dragon. And we saw the Revelation 12 sign, which was the red dragon at the woman's feet. And I don't have any of that pulled up, but if you've watched my videos, I've covered this probably about a dozen times about the Rev 12 sign, which was 7 years ago. And interestingly, we had a number of things happen very recently that tie to things that happened 7 years ago. And I'll get into that a little bit later in this video. But the fact is, we saw that happen in 2017. And so there is something definitely happening here. We saw a number of signs from 2014 through 2017 we're talking constellations. We had blood moons, blood moon tetrads. We had 2014, 2015 into 2017, and we had a ton of this stuff going on in space during this time, which clearly indicated we're in a unique time. And this kind of correlates a little bit with the Mayan calendar and the Hopi predictions, the Hopi American Indian tribe. But getting back to this, so my theory is that actually it's the mind is where realities change. Because if you think about it, you live in a reality made by humans. You don't live in the forest. Okay, if you lived in the forest, you would have no clue what's going on in society, right? And you wouldn't even know. You would be none the wiser. If you were in the forest in the 1800s, you're in the forest right now, you never talk to anybody in society, you could live the same way either way and you'd be fine, right? You could be hunting and fishing. You wouldn't even know, right? This is what I'm saying. So we don't live in that reality. We live in a reality built by humans. Humans that are influenced by something else. Something maybe dark, right? And of course, this is what I would think was being referred to in the Twilight Zone, is that we are actually moving into another reality. And I think they've done this many times. So getting into this. So you have, of course, and this is a little bit of a segue, but you have the men, of course, in black. And I thought this is really curious. And the reason why he circled this, I was trying to figure out why he circled this. Notice his foot. It's sideways. He's not able to walk normal. He literally has his foot sideways. Like instead of like this, it's like this. He's walking like this. The guy can't even walk normally because he's not used to walking maybe with this, body or whatever you want to call it. Very strange. I was like, what in the world? Of course, when these people spoke to this is in a hotel. When they spoke to these men, they had no facial hair. They had no hair on their head. They had no eyebrows. They're very pale looking. And this seems to be what all of these guys look like. I just showed a clip over on my other channel of one of these people. This is the most high resolution video of one ever taken. This was from 2018. Actually, I found the original video. It was on Apex TV, June 18th, 2018. So 6/18/18. And he had an interview with this woman as well. Her name, I think, is Nicole. Apex TV actually interviewed this woman, but he set the video to private, so you can't actually watch the interview anymore. But apparently she even did an interview afterwards. And it was the security guy who sent in this clip to them, to Apex TV. But as you can see here, he has no facial hair whatsoever, no eyebrows, and very curiously, he's able to, of course, control her somehow. Let me show you what I mean. Like she's talking to him, she gets a little concerned. Actually, this is a little bit later. Let's see if I can find the original part. I think it's back here. Okay, let's play this here. So you can see she's talking to him. She gets concerned and tells him to leave because he looks maybe strange. I don't know. She grabs something from her desk, which I believe is a GUN. At that point, he waves his hand in a strange way, as you can see here. And then she all of a sudden seems to be under some sort of spell or control or whatever you want to call it, puts the things down. He tells her to go get something else. She grabs a camera in her bag and then basically walks out and follows and sort of goes the direction that he's leading her. And it seems to be like somehow he was able to, control, of course, her. Now, what's interesting is this isn't the only video like this. There's actually a lot of really strange ones, even happening to famous celebrities like Dan Aykroyd. Dan Aykroyd was in Ghostbusters, if you remember. He apparently was looking into UFOs and things of that nature as well. Was doing a huge TV series on it. They had actually made a number of episodes. And apparently something strange happened. He was on one of it, several episodes in. And he went out to have a smoke or something. He was just taking a break. He went out to have a smoke. And he goes outside, just outside the door, and he's just standing there on the sidewalk. He looks across, doesn't see anything, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a car shows up, just literally shows up, like that. Like it just shows up. And there's a man standing there in, of course, black, and gives him a strange, like, disgusted look, like he doesn't like him. Okay? And then all of a sudden he disappears again. The car also, he looks away for a second and he looks back and the car's gone and the man's gone. Which, of course, I don't think the car could leave that quickly. Just looking away and then look back. You know what I mean? It's really strange how he described it. And there's other people who describe the same thing where they would get a call on the phone about something like a book they're writing. And then as soon as they hang up, someone knocks at the door and it's one of these guys. There's no car. How did they get there? Really strange. And of course, he went back inside. Dan Aykroyd went back inside and he immediately got a call that their show was canceled. Okay. So his show was canceled, never got aired. Literally got the call exactly after this occurred. And he thought that was very strange. He let that be known, as you've seen. We have a picture of one of these men, in black right here. Very old photo. Standing here. They usually are dressed all in black. They don't have facial, of course, hair. As you can see, they look strange. We saw this more high resolution one here. When this guy turns his face sideways, he has no nose. And you can't even see any facial features. I showed it on the image on my other video. I can maybe pause it there. Let's see if I can pause it there. I don't know if it's kind of hard. Let's see here. I don't know if I can do it. Let me back it up a little bit more. I don't think so. No, this isn't going to show it the way I want to show it. But trust me, if you pause it in the right spot, you'll look and his face is sideways. You can't even see a nose, and you can't see any features. It almost looks like just nothing. It's like really strange looking. I don't know what to think of that. But what's interesting, like I wanted to mention, is that when you talk about the Hadron, of course, Collider, you look at how it was developed, when it was developed, who funded it, and you look into the history of the companies that funded it. They're related to the Rocka, of course, fellers. And it seems like the funding always comes from the same two families. That's one of the families, the Rocka, fellers. The other one is the Roth, of course, child family. Okay? And what's interesting is, even if you go back in the 1800s, same thing. We have it with CERN, where the internet was born. And I believe there's more to the internet than people realize. There's some sort of tie between the internet and the Hadron, I believe. And this is, I think both are in the process of changing realities, whether it's via the mind, as the Twilight Zone says, or something else. Now, interestingly, we have also Sigmund Freud. He was funded by the Rocka, of course, fellers. Very interestingly also, this man was not exactly considered, before he was funded, he was not known, he was not listened to, but they propped up someone they liked, what he was saying. And of course, he was coming out saying that religion was a problem. Matter of fact, he even said that it was a pathology. He said religion and neurosis are similar products of the human mind, saying they were created in the human mind. And interestingly, he lived around 1856 to 1939. That's also when we had a huge amount of insane asylums. Okay? Same time frame. And what's really interesting is when you look into this, a lot of them were put in because of religious fervor. Okay? Now just think about this. How do you change realities? You get some people on a pedestal as an authority, and everyone listens to the authority, right? Einstein, Freud, all these men put on pedestals up high and told that they're the authority. They put all their writings in newspapers, in the radio back then. And of course, interestingly, at the same time we had all these insane asylums, we had huge orphanages. Who do you think these people, where do you think they came from? Maybe they came from the parents that were in the insane asylums. That's where all these orphans came from. You see how that works? So if you want to change the society, make them less, religious, well, you got to get the certain voices where no one hears them. You lock them in a building. No one can listen to them anymore. See how that works? This also happened over in other countries, but in a different way. You have, of course, what I call the Russlans, Russia. That country, you had Marx over there, who was funded by the same people. Let me show you that. We're talking Karl here, was funded by the Rockefellers and other groups like this as well. Interestingly also is the fact that when you look at Sigmund Freud, he said religion was a construct of the mind, but at the same time, he said something rather curious. Let me see if I can find it real quick here. Oh. Okay, where is it at? Where did he say this line? I think it's on. I think I have it over here. Where is it at? Is it this one? I think it's this one right here. No, nope, that's not it. He basically, here it is. Here it is. This is it. This is it right here. This is it. He says something over here. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Give me a second. I don't know why I don't have it in front of me. Considers. He says he considered God a fantasy, but he still considered himself a JEW, which was really interesting. He had a quote. Yeah, here it is. Here's the quote. I found it finally. It took me a minute. I don't know why I couldn't find it at first. It's right here. My parents were JEWs, and I consider myself one as well. Well, that's tied to a religion. So to me, that seemed a little strange that he said, in one hand, God is a fantasy, but in the other hand, he says, well, I'm still of my own religion. Or is it maybe because he didn't like a certain religion that was in America? And that's why they were doing what they were doing. You see what I mean? The same is the case with Marx. But in a different way in his country, they arrested them. We're talking about Orthodox priests and things like that, and got rid of them. Same idea, get rid of these people to change the reality from one of believing the King of Kings to atheism. And that's what they did over in that country. It was a little bit different process, but the same idea. All right? And they're both funded by the same people. Interestingly, you're going to want to know this about Netflix CEO. Let me show you this first, though. Edward here, Bernays, this man was related to Sigmund Freud, also funded by the Rockefellers. He was also well known as being the first person to pioneer public relations and propaganda. This is how you put someone up at the top where everybody listens to as an authority. He was the one that pioneered that. And of course, this family also put money behind another man. What is that guy's name? Kingston, Ton or something like that. I can't remember what his name is. For this type of research right here. And let me show you what's going on with this. So it's all about the devil and what he's doing. Okay? Working through this particular family right here to do two things. One, he was in the church. Let me show you that. Where is that at? I got that open around here. Yeah, here we are. This is actually a different family, though. This is the Rothschild. They both work hand in hand to do all this stuff in different parts of society. But the Darby and the Schofield Bible were both funded by this guy here. Why? Because they also taught a certain eschatology, a certain teaching to go along with it that they liked. And this is what has been the main teaching in a lot of churches these days, is from their first writings that was funded by this family. So what we're talking about is all the sort of thinking on how things are going to play out in the future, also, how to live your life, being very anti-sex, being very, very anti-family as well, shouldn't have a bunch of kids, all this kind of stuff, comes from this teaching. Very anti-sex as well. And interestingly, so if you think about, the devil is doing two things. He's in the church putting bad doctrines, and he's also in the world with the answer. So he's got a vacuum in the church, very anti-sex, and then he has another family publish this to be official as this is a great way to live your life. Looking at sex is for just mere fun and go in that direction. Of course, the person that did this research is very much this, but he was considered an authority because money was behind him. Okay. And then this led into this revolution right here, because the church had no answer to it. Why did the church have no answer? Because the church also was getting their ideas from the same source, the devil. So the church had a vacuum, and then the answer was provided by the devil on another side. See what I mean? That's how that worked. At any rate, so apparently the Netflix CEO, or the guy that co-founded it, is related to that guy who pioneered public relations and propaganda. He's also related to Sigmund Freud. Isn't that kind of strange? The guy that owns Netflix or runs it, co-founder, is from the same family. You think they're not trying to make your reality a certain way? He's part of it. You see how that works? So all of this stuff, and if you look at, here's an example today of this stuff happening. Look at the UK. Look how it was back in the 1980s. Let me just play a little bit of You can see there, looks pretty normal. Like you remember UK used to be. This is the UK today.
It's obviously not racist. You're not British, are you?
We should be joining together with the Muslims.
This is England. Don't take over England.
So, of course, England's been going through a lot right now. You've seen and heard about all these people out in the streets, and it's become pretty ridiculous, actually. You have now even a judge over in the UK warning people just simply standing on the sidelines, observing as being part of it, and refused bail. I mean, what if you're standing in your yard behind a fence and you're just watching? For some reason, you're guilty, apparently now. This is how it's working there. We have a guy that was jailed for what we're calling Facebook posts for 20 months. That's what's going on there right now. Can you even imagine that back in the 1980s? Absolutely not. Of course, the same money behind all these things, even in the 1800s, is behind what we're seeing today. What's going on with Harley, what's going on with a lot of these companies, Arby's. I can show you those as well. There's actually a ton of brands that involved. I think it's Inspire Brands. I think it was. Yeah, Inspire Brands, which is Arby's, Dunkin' Donuts, Jimmy John's, Sonic. All these companies are totally going the woke route, because they're owned by BlackRock, or they are being, they have a significant percentage of their stock. BlackRock does, and Vanguard. These companies are driving them a certain direction, pardon the pun, but now we're having this huge backlash with Harley, where in Sturgis, everyone is pretty much not even looking at their booth. They're now not able to sell their Harley. Well, they want to get rid of it. They can't even get rid of it because it's lost its value, because the value was all in the idea of what it stood for. And now they don't stand for any of that stuff. And apparently that's what's happening with a lot of companies now. All of this because of BlackRock. And what's interesting, though, is I think we're seeing a change. So we saw 2012 where they're doing, we actually started in the 1800s, but you can see it's different phases, right? 2012, I think, was the nexus point where we see all this stuff happening on a much faster level. But I believe this stuff is also changing again. This reality is changing again in 2024, but I think it's towards a good direction. And I think this comes back to the whole looking glass thing. you've heard of Project, Looking Glass. They're talking about how they're not able to stop people from understanding what's going on and waking up. Okay. And there's a video, I'm sure maybe some of you haven't seen it, but there's videos out there talking about Looking Glass and how they were trying to stop people from figuring all the stuff out, with the stuff I'm telling you about right now. And they tried so many different things, and they had some sort of machine that could actually see the future to see how it would play out. And they couldn't figure out how to solve it. They couldn't solve the demise of their power, right? Because people eventually figured out. So the social media, this internet, seemed to be at first working in their advantage, but now it's starting to work against them. And I think we're going to be seeing everything changing and reversing towards a positive direction. Here's an example of something. I mentioned earlier about the Rev 12 sign, which happened in 2017. That also is when we had the ad apocalypse. You remember that? Well, interestingly, 7 years later, right after it happened, we had this happen. We had Google losing, of course, in a landmark case. That's not it. There's a ton of other things as well. You had Elon Musk file a lawsuit against an ad conglomerate that was trying to stop people from getting certain ads, right? And they abruptly shut down as a result, just gave up. They gave up right when he filed the lawsuit, he won. That's not it. Another thing happened as well. The former CEO of this website you're watching, we're talking YouTube, she, of course, recently died. A lot of people don't know about it. It happened within a few days ago. A lot of people don't know about that. And she was the one who started the whole ad apocalypse. And that was 7 years to the day. And you remember there was a parable, the King of Kings, he had a parable. It wasn't the parable. I can't remember what it was called. It wasn't the parable of the fig tree, I don't think. But it was basically a tree. A tree, it wasn't growing any fruit. And he said, let's cultivate the tree, try to make it better, and we'll give it 7 more years to see if it produces fruit. And if it doesn't produce fruit in 7 years, we'll cut it down and get rid of it. And this, I feel like this is sort of a pattern. So we had 7 years for them to change and turn around, and they didn't. So now this is what's happened as a result of it. But that's just kind of my thoughts on all that. I'm kind of wanting some of you guys to think. Let me know in the comment section below, and thanks for watching.